A great city is burning. Its towers are collapsing into fire. Its mightiest heroes lie dead in the dust outside its walls. The strongest, the fastest, the bravest warriors the world has ever produced, all of them gone. And standing among the ruins is a giant wooden horse, the trick that ended everything. This is the fall of Troy, and it is not just the end of a war. It is the end of an entire age of the world. Because there was once a time, the Greeks believed, when the children of gods walked among us. When a man could strangle a monster with his bare hands. When a hero could turn an army to stone with a single glance. When the gods themselves came down from the heavens to fight beside mortals on the battlefield. An age of demigods and monsters and impossible glory. The age of heroes, and here is the secret at the heart of this final chapter. The thing almost no one tells you. That golden age of heroes was always meant to end. The gods had decided it. Everything you're about to see, every hero, every triumph, every legend, was building toward a deliberate, fiery conclusion that would close the door between heaven and earth forever and leave the world to a new and lonelier race. Us. This is the grand finale. Greek Mythology, Part 3. The Age of Heroes and the End of the World of Legend. Welcome back to History Geek, and welcome to the finale. If you've been with me for parts 1 and 2, thank you. This last chapter is for you. Quick recap. In part 1, the universe was born from a void, and after a war that shook the cosmos, Zeus took the throne of the gods. In part 2, the gods created humanity, and the titan Prometheus was tortured for all eternity for daring to give us fire. Though we were promised that one day a great hero would set him free. Today, that hero is born. Today, the world fills with heroes, and today, the age of myth comes to its thunderous end. This is part 3 of 3, the conclusion of the whole saga. So, if this series has gripped you, the best thing you can do right now is hit subscribe and ring the bell. It's how this channel keeps making epics like this, and there are many more legendary stories still to come. One tap. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Now, let's finish it properly. Stay to the very end, because the way this age of heroes dies reveals something profound about why these stories still matter to you and me thousands of years later. Let's go. To understand the age of heroes, you have to understand what a hero actually was, because it didn't mean what it means today. To the Greeks, a hero wasn't just a brave person. A hero was, very often, something far rarer and stranger, the child of a god and a mortal, a demigod, half human, half divine. For a few short generations, the Greeks believed the gods came down and had children with humankind, Zeus above all, but many of the gods, and the children of those unions were extraordinary. Mortal, yes, able to bleed and die like us, but blessed with a spark of the divine. Superhuman strength, impossible courage, beauty, skill, and destinies written in the stars. These half-divine children became the heroes whose names still echo today. And think about what that meant for the shape of the world, for this one brief age, the gulf between heaven and earth, the gulf that had existed since sky was torn from earth at the very beginning, was bridged by the bodies of the heroes themselves, who were living proof that the divine and the mortal could meet. Gods and humans were closer in this age than they had ever been, or would ever be again. But here is the dark truth, running beneath all the glory, and the Greeks' own poets told us this. The age of heroes was not meant to last. Some of their oldest poetry says that Zeus himself looked down at the crowded, quarrelsome world of gods and demigods and mortals all tangled together and decided it had to end. that the earth had grown too heavy with this half-divine race, that the bridge between heaven and earth had to be torn back down, and gods and mortals separated once more, cleanly forever. So Zeus formed a plan, a long, patient plan to bring the age of heroes to a deliberate close, to let it burn at its very brightest, and then snuff it out. And the instrument he would eventually use was a war, the greatest war in the history of legend. But that war was still generations away. First, the age of heroes had to reach its glorious height, and it began with the man who became the template for every hero who followed. His name was Perseus, a son of Zeus, and his story set the pattern. A hero blessed by the gods, sent to do the impossible. And Perseus was handed the most impossible task imaginable, to bring back the head of a monster so terrible that the mere sight of her face turned any living creature instantly to stone. Her name was Medusa, a gorgon, with snakes for hair and a gaze that meant death. Countless would-be heroes had gone to face her, and every one of them still stood there, frozen. A field of stone statues, men caught in the instant they made the fatal mistake of looking at her. But Perseus had two things those others lacked: the favor of the gods and the wisdom to use it. The gods equipped him winged sandals to fly, a cap that made him invisible, a special bag to hold his prize, and most important of all, a shield polished to a mirror finish. And that mirror was the key, because Perseus understood the trick. He would not look at Medusa directly. He would look only at her reflection in the bronze. He crept up on the sleeping Gorgon, watching only her reflection, raised his blade, and struck off her head in one blow, never once meeting her deadly eyes. And the Greeks said that from her severed neck sprang a wonder, the winged horse Pegasus, leaping into the world fully formed. Even in death, the monster gave birth to a legend, and now Perseus carried the ultimate weapon, a severed head that still turned anything that saw it to stone. On his journey home, he used it to save a princess, Andromeda, chained to a rock as a sacrifice to a sea monster. He simply showed the beast Medusa's face and turned it to stone where it reared out of the waves. And when he finally returned home to find a tyrant had been tormenting his mother and a hostile court stood against him, Perseus walked into that hall, raised the head high, and turned the whole gathering to stone in an instant. That was the template, the hero. Mortal enough to fail, divine enough to triumph, clever enough to turn even a curse into a weapon. Perseus showed the world what a hero could be, but he was only the beginning, because the greatest hero of them all was about to be born, and his life would be more glorious and more tragic than anything that came before. His name was Heracles, though you may know him better by his Roman name, Hercules. He was a son of Zeus, born to a mortal woman, and he was the strongest being who ever lived, stronger than any man, stronger than most gods. But Heracles was born under a shadow, because the queen of the gods, Hera, the wife of Zeus, despised him. He was the living proof of yet another of her husband's betrayals, and her hatred for this innocent child knew no limits. The greatest hero in history would spend his entire life hounded by the wrath of a goddess who wanted him destroyed, and Hera's cruelest blow is one of the darkest moments in all of mythology. She struck Heracles with a fit of madness, a temporary insanity that ripped away his reason. And in that madness, not knowing what he did, the hero killed his own wife and children with his own hands. When he came back to himself and saw what he had done, the grief nearly destroyed him. The strongest man in the world was brought to his knees by a horror no strength could undo. To atone for this unbearable act, Heracles was sent to perform a series of seemingly impossible tasks, the famous 12 labors, and this is the part everyone remembers. The first labor set the tone. He was sent to kill a monstrous lion whose golden hide was so tough that no weapon on earth could pierce it. Arrows bounced off, blades shattered. So Heracles threw his weapons aside, wrapped his arms around the beast, and strangled it to death with his bare hands. Then he skinned it using its own razor claws and wore its impenetrable hide as a cloak for the rest of his life. That is the image of Heracles, you know, the strong man in the lion skin. One after another, he conquered the labors. Monstrous beasts, impossible feats, journeys to the ends of the earth, and even into the land of the dead itself. And it was during these wanderings that Heracles kept the promise the gods had made at the dawn of mankind. Remember Prometheus, the Titan chained to the rock at the edge of the world, the eagle tearing at him for eternity, all for the crime of giving us fire? On one of his journeys, Heracles climbed that very mountain. He drew his bow, and with a single arrow, he shot the great eagle out of the sky, and then he broke the unbreakable chains and set Prometheus free. Think about the beauty of that. The friend of humanity, who suffered for giving us the fire of civilization, was finally freed by humanity's own greatest champion, a son of mankind and the gods together. The bridge between heaven and earth, healing the oldest wound in the story. It took the whole age of heroes to pay that debt. And Heracles paid it. Heracles' own end was agony. Betrayed by a dying enemy's poison, his mortal body destroyed by pain no strength could fight. He built his own funeral pyre and climbed onto it. But this is the only story of its kind in all of Greek myth. Because as the flames burned away his mortal part, the divine spark in him, the part that came from Zeus, did not die. Heracles was lifted up to Olympus and made a full god, the only hero ever to cross that bridge completely, the mortal who became divine. And there, the Greeks said, even Hera finally made her peace with him at last. Heracles was the age of heroes at its absolute peak, its greatest glory, its deepest tragedy, and the one who fully bridged the mortal and the divine. But an age cannot stay at its peak forever. And the gods had not forgotten their plan to bring it all to an end. The instrument was now ready. It was time for the war that would close the world of legend. It began, of all places, at a wedding. And with a secret you've actually been carrying since part 2. The gods married a sea goddess named Thetis to a mortal man. Why marry a goddess to a mere mortal? Because of a prophecy. It was foretold that Thetis would bear a son greater than his father. This was the very secret Prometheus had once held over Zeus. If a god fathered that son might overthrow the king of heaven. So, to be safe, the gods married her off to a mortal, guaranteeing her mighty son would be a hero, not a god who could threaten Olympus. To that wedding came every god but one, the goddess of strife and discord, who was not invited. Furious, she tossed a single golden apple into the feast, inscribed with 2 words for the fairest, and 3 goddesses each claimed it: Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. To settle the quarrel, they turned to a young Trojan prince named Paris and asked him to judge which of them was the most beautiful, each one secretly bribing him. And Aphrodite, goddess of love, offered the winning bribe, the most beautiful woman in the world, so Paris chose her. There was only one problem. The most beautiful woman in the world, Helen, was already married to a king of Greece. But a promise from the goddess of love is not so easily denied. Paris went to Greece and carried Helen away to Troy. And that single act lit the fuse on the greatest war the age of heroes would ever see. The kings of Greece had sworn an oath to defend Helen's marriage, and now they called it in. They assembled a coalition of practically every hero alive and launched 1,000 ships across the sea to take Helen back and destroy Troy. And so, the flower of the entire age of heroes gathered into two great armies converged on the walls of a single city. Exactly as Zeus's plan required, the siege lasted 10 long years, and it drew in the mightiest heroes of the age. On the Greek side stood Achilles, the son of that sea goddess Thetis, the greatest warrior who ever lived, all but unkillable in battle. There's a famous later legend that his mother had made him invulnerable everywhere but one spot on his heel. Though, I'll be honest, that detail comes from much later than the original tales, where Achilles is simply the supreme fighter. Against him stood the noblest of the Trojans, Prince Hector, defending his home and his family. And clever Odysseus, the most cunning man in the world, whose mind would ultimately decide the war. And here the bridge between gods and mortals reached its breaking point. Because the gods didn't just watch this war, they came down and fought in it, taking sides, shielding their favorites, striking down their enemies, even being wounded themselves. For the last time in the history of the world, gods and heroes bled side by side on the same battlefield. It was the age of heroes blazing at its very brightest, which meant it was almost time for it to go out. And go out it did, in blood. One by one, the great heroes fell. Hector, the defender of Troy, was killed by Achilles in single combat, and then Achilles himself, the greatest of them all, was brought down by an arrow, his invincibility finally failing him. The mightiest warriors the world had ever produced were dying in the dust before the walls of a single city, just as the gods intended. The age was burning itself away. And Troy fell at last, not to strength, but to cunning, the idea of Odysseus. The Greeks built an enormous hollow wooden horse, hid their best warriors inside, and pretended to sail away in defeat, leaving the horse as an apparent offering. The triumphant Trojans dragged it inside their own impregnable walls, and in the dead of night, the hidden warriors crept out, threw open the gates, and let in the army that had only pretended to leave. Troy, the great city that had held for 10 years, burned to the ground in a single night. And when the smoke cleared, the age of heroes was effectively over. The heroes who survived Troy mostly met hard ends, murdered on their return, lost at sea for decades, scattered and broken. The great demigods were gone, and the gods, their terrible plan complete, began to withdraw. They stopped coming down. They stopped fathering heroes. The bridge between heaven and earth, built of the bodies of the demigods, was dismantled, exactly as Zeus had willed it at the start. Gods and mortals were separated once again, cleanly, finally, the way they'd been torn apart at the very dawn of creation. And what was left behind in a world the gods had stepped back from? Ordinary human beings, no longer walking beside gods, no longer giving birth to heroes, just people, mortal, unaided, alone. In other words, us. The age of legends had ended, and the age of ordinary human history had begun. And here's a haunting footnote. Troy itself may not be pure fantasy. There really was a city in what is now Turkey that was besieged and burned in the deep past, and many believe its ruins are the Troy of legend. The myths don't just end where history begins. In places, they reach across and touch it. So we've reached the end. 3 episodes, from a void with nothing in it, to the birth of the gods, to the creation of mankind, to this, The age of heroes burning out and leaving the world to us. So let me answer the question I promised at the start. Why does the end of this age matter so much? Why do these stories still grip us thousands of years after the people who believed them turned to dust? Because look at what the heroes were really chasing. Every one of them, Perseus, Heracles, Achilles, knew they were mortal. They knew they would die. What they wanted, more than anything, was glory. To do something so great that they would be remembered forever. The Greeks had a word for it. They believed that a hero who won enough glory could achieve a kind of immortality, not by living forever, but by being remembered forever, by becoming a story. And here's the breathtaking part. It worked. Achilles has been dead for 3,000 years, if he ever lived at all. And yet, here we are, you and I, speaking his name right now. The heroes wanted to live forever in the memory of humankind, and they have. They became immortal in the only way anyone truly can, by becoming a story so powerful, it refuses to die. Every time we tell these tales, we keep them alive. We are the immortality they were reaching for. That is why the age of heroes ends exactly where it does, at the edge of real history, handing the world over to us. The gods withdrew, the demigods died, and the job of carrying the fire Prometheus stole, the fire of memory and meaning and story, passed to ordinary mortals. To us, we are the ones who kept the gods alive long after the gods left. And as long as someone, somewhere, is still telling these stories, the world of legend never truly ends at all. From a yawning void to the throne of Zeus, to the fire of Prometheus, to the walls of Troy. That is the story the Greeks told to explain the universe and themselves and us. And now you carry it too. Thank you for journeying through all three parts with me. It has genuinely been an honor to be your guide through the greatest story ever told. If this trilogy meant something to you, here's my final ask. Subscribe, ring the bell, and share this with one person who loves a great story. It's the single best way to keep epics like this coming. There are many more legends, mysteries, and lost worlds still waiting on this channel, and I would love for you to be there for all of them. Subscribe, and let's keep exploring history together. Tell me in the comments, who was your favorite hero of the age? Perseus, Heracles, Achilles, or someone we touched on along the way? And what should History Geek explore next? I read every single comment. I'm History Geek. Thank you for journeying through the corridors of time with me. Until the next adventure, keep the stories alive.